I had a wee daughter, Ruby, hardly ever saw her. Never got on with her mother. I married her and all, but I never liked her, nor she never liked me. So I done her a favour. I left her. I married the sea. Got a wee boat of my own. This is my home. This is where I belong. I belong. I belong. Then one morning he got out of bed and without warning he dropped dead. They buried him in Cushendall, the place he was from. He couldn't take his boat with him, so he left it behind to Ruby, along with some money. And when the paperwork was done, she bought an acre of land in Donegal. And then she went up to Larne, and a big crane lifted the boat out of the water, swung it round, and laid it down on the bed of a low loader. And they drove her down the motorway across the border, where the roads get narrower and narrower and windier, till they finally got to Ruby's acre. And another crane lifted the boat from the bed of the low loader, swung it round, and laid it down in the heart of Ruby's acre. And there it sits, surrounded by wild flowers. Ruby lies sleeping in the captain's cabin, and the scent of honeysuckle slips into her dreams. It's unlikely she's dreaming about me. How's that level?
That's lovely. We'll have to try really hard now to speak loud.
Will we?
Because
Yeah.
feeling very, very mellow.
Yeah.
I'd love to introduce you to Little John Nee, but what just happened there says it all. What you did there, I can't get the tense right. You wove or you weaved a world,
Right.
and we were all captivated.
I hope so. And I hope everybody watching on the World Wide Web is captivated as well, or to some degree entertained.
Ah, yeah. And that's, in the years that I've been watching you, that's what you do. You bring people on a journey into different worlds. I have no idea what's going through your mind, but I'd love to know, because the worlds are always so different, and you always find something of great redemption in worlds that use that word that we haven't heard, you and I never heard until recently, dystopian elements.
Yeah.
Tell me about that. How you pick those worlds, how you find yourself in them.
Well, I'm always baffled when people talk nicely like that about me, as if I'm, basically.
Where's that tenner you owe me?
Basically, do you know what it is? I love stories and good stories, and being exposed to good stories all my life, as most of us are, and being brought places by like Eamon Kelly. Remember Eamon Kelly, Shanachie? Like his stories would be so far out, or Flann O'Brien, particularly Irish storytellers, and rock and roll as well, Patti Smith, or David Bowie, all these people that have weaved magic in my life and brought me off on adventures and into other worlds, and so I've got in the habit of going to these other worlds, and as well as that, the fact that our own world, to imagine that we're all living in the one world is not right at all, because you know, we all have our own different experiences of thing, you know. There's that great Ivor Cutler song about I'm the centre of my universe and you are of yours. And every so often we meet for tea. And it's like that we are, like, we're all living in separate universes, and we all conform to some degree that this is the way, this is the world. And and the news and the media and all this conspires to bring us all into line, to view things in a particular way, and not to be imaginative. And that's why it's really important, and we're so fortunate in Ireland to have that degree of great art that always has allowed us to fall into our imagination and to follow our imagination. And for me as a performer, the audiences are so willing, A, so willing to come with me, and B, so able. You know, as I say in that show, Nettle Horses, basically I have these stories, but the audience comes with their imagination. And then, like, you've got maybe 200 people. They've all had a different experience because it's all happened in the audience's imaginations. So everyone's got different pictures. So even that story about the boat in the meadow, I don't know what your experience was, kind of, you know, it's your imagination. So you were colouring it all in.
Exactly, yeah, because I know, I always think of that with books.
Yeah.
That when you bring a book to the screen, you blow that apart.
Yeah.
Each one of us, as you say, has a different.
And that's what I love about theatre, and I find that now as well, is that people aren't getting the chance to, because everything's done for us now, people aren't getting the chance to engage their imaginations so much, so that it's, that's why theatre has got potential. And music as well, because music leaves you that space as well to sit and listen and dream. Yeah.
Although with music, unless you choose to be enveloped by it, it becomes just something in the background, something that's traveling along with you. But in the case of what you do with theatre, when you're here, your whole mind, your whole being, every part of you is connected to what's happening on stage. It's beautiful.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah.
Just thinking, when you say two words for me, say godmother and fairy in the other way around.
Fairy godmother.
So that's 3 times now you have used. So fairy godmother, Ivor Cutler, and Eamon Kelly.
Yeah.
I was trying to think earlier of who this man is, and those 3 things came up. Now, the fairy godmother, there's no way he'd say that. But I feel that when you're talking, when you're weaving a story, when I'm captivated, that I'm all snuggled up, and you're speaking this gently into my ear.
But thank you. It's lovely. Obviously, it's really, really nice, and thank you so much for saying them things. But
Gertching, you owe me another tenner.
But talking about the tradition that we're coming from as well.
Yeah.
I mean, all the artists that inspire me all the time, and that's why I do this, is because I'm thrilled by whether it's Jimi Hendrix playing guitar or Tom Waits. There's a beautiful storyteller.
Another storyteller.
Do you know, beautiful storyteller. And or Dylan, or you know, any of these people is like just, or John Cooper Clarke, or Linton Kwesi. When I went to London, there was around the time of the 70s. And I was in Letterkenny, and as I say, the word was pretty bleak in the 70s, from say 72, Bloody Sunday, and the Catholic Church weren't painting a particularly bright future for me, kind of thing, you know. And then you listen to Jimi Hendrix, and just like that, all of a sudden the world opens up. I don't know what was going on with Jimi Hendrix, but like it was it doesn't have to be like this. And then David Bowie, and you know, I think in Letterkenny in the 70s, there wasn't much gender awareness or fluidity there. You know? But at the same time, 73, there's David Bowie with Life on Mars, and you've got all these really hard boot boys, and they're all mad into this bisexual man, David Bowie, you know, like, and it's not a problem, you know. So it's that thing about the artist expanding the universe. And for myself, when you've got people like, let's go really extreme on it, say Donald Trump, or Irish patriots, as we were talking about earlier on. Irish patriots.
New Irish patriots.
Yeah, well, obviously. New Irish patriots. Constricting and making the world so horrible and narrow. That's why art is really important to say no.
Yeah.
Yeah. you know.
And old Ireland was completely open. And it was only in the 1800s when we got Catholic emancipation that the walls started coming in on top of us.
Right.
And they've been coming in up until just
Right.
recently.
Yeah,
Which is,
yeah.
It's wonderful. But now these neo-nationalists are trying to, is that a term, neo-nationalists?
I think so.
They're trying to make
is
it
now.
nasty and narrow again.
It is now, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's where we're...
I was in grand form until we
know.
started talking.
I know.
Would you finish that song?
Yeah. So that's the basis to it. You know, because a lot of my songs and stories come from theatre shows that last an hour and a half or something like that. It's when I take pieces out, there's no context from them. So the context for that is that there is a woman called Ruby who's living in a field in Donegal in a boat, and a kind of tugboat. So she lives there, surrounded by wildflowers.
And this is
character,
true.
This is, of course. And my character, Sparkplug Callahan, has a notion of her, as they say in Donegal. And after a funeral, she invites him back to the boat. And they're on the boat, it starts to rain. He fantasizes about the flood and the boat floating and all that. Long story short, the rain stops and they step outside. And the rain has just stopped. And the rain has just stopped. And the earth is really musky. And a steam rises up. And it's so hot Donegal summer. And I'm looking at Ruby. She turns around, she smiles at me. That's a nice tattoo you have on your calf. And she slowly unbuttons her fine blue lamb's wool cardigan and lets it slip off her shoulder to expose an arm full of tattoos, maritime and nautical, mesmeric mermaids and mesmerized mariners. And she lets the cardigan fall off, and on her shoulder blade there's more tattoos. There's an old boat in the middle of a field of flowers. And at the bottom of the gangplank, there's a rockabilly rebel chick, looks like Ruby. On the other side of the gangplank, there's a punky old blues man, looks like me. And as I follow the tattoos down her back like a kaleidoscope, and then at the center of a nest of tattoos, there's a football crest. Glasgow Rangers. Where what's the story with the Rangers tattoo? When I was 6 years old, my daddy brought me on a holiday over to Scotland on a ferry boat, up to Glasgow for a couple of days. First match of the season in Ibrox Stadium. Come on, you jeers. Daddy. Derry's walls. Daddy. No surrender. The sash my father wore. After that, we went to the park, had a picnic and fed the ducks. It was just the two of us. It was just the two of us. Upstairs on a bus. Toffee, apples and candy floss. The next day we went to the zoo. About a month after he died, I got the Rangers tattoo. Thank you.
Where did they come from?
Well, actually, that's interesting because I don't know if this should go out in the World Web. I should tell this story. I was a friend of mine called round to see me.
Everybody on the web.
A friend called round to see me one time, and he was Vipassana, practicing Vipassana Buddhism, and he was from Scotland, and in Ireland, and it's when he was telling me about Buddhism, and I was getting a bit patronising. It's kind of a lot about, like we're all one, and he's very enlightened altogether. And I'm sitting, we're listening, having cups of tea, and it's just, it's just all peace and love and all that, And we have a cup of tea, and so I mentioned something about Rangers, something about football, and he goes, "Oh, I see them, they're animals." And it's like, so that kind of brought that thing to me, like just that whole, the depth of that sectarian impulse. So I thought that notion of falling in love with somebody and you're just totally in love with this person, and it's
from the wrong
this
side.
this is the one, and then you find out she's a Rangers fan. It's like, so that was how that.
And you grew up in Glasgow.
I grew up in Glasgow, yeah.
And you were living in that world where
yeah. But it's a really interesting thing because Glasgow and the north were pretty much the same. My parents were from Donegal. At that stage, I would say Glasgow was the capital city of Donegal, and it had been for a long, long time. Like, particularly, there's one year during the famine where something like 24,000 people arrived. Irish people, weren't just Donegal people, but Donegal people were often seasonal workers in Glasgow as well. And like my grandfather had gone over, I don't know if people had gone over before him, but my grandfather had gone over on my mother's side and worked in the coal mines, got the fare to America, made some money, back to Ireland, bought land in Donegal, farmed, couldn't keep it up, back to Scotland, back down the coal mines kind of thing, My mother then, as a young girl, 16, moved to the Gorbals in Glasgow as well. The Gorbals, slum area in Glasgow, where as recent as the 30s, probably after the 30s, it was common to meet women who could only speak Irish, wouldn't have any English. Wow, yeah. So there was that. So for me, at my school in Glasgow, all the names was like Devine, O'Donnell, Doherty, McLaughlin. They were all Donegal names, and at the school time, like when it come to the holiday time, and they'd say, "All right, we're going to take no lessons today. We'll all sing a song." Okay, Ronan, you sing a song, and the wee boy'd get up, he'd be about 7, and he'd sing Kevin Barry, And they went, "All right, Ronan, that's lovely. Okay, Michael, would you like to sing?" Michael would sing Kevin Barry as well, and it'd be like, it was just. And I remember, I was thinking about it today. I remembered one of our teachers. She was really frustrated because we were all these Donegal kids. We called Scotch. We'd talk about the Scotch people, right? And she said, it's not Scotch, it's Scots or Scottish. But we call it Scotch because that's what we heard at home from our Donegal parents. And that was very much, my mother would meet some other woman in the street and they'd start talking about home. But our house is there. And but home was always Donegal. Do you know, so that was, yeah.
And that happened all in all the big cities in England as well.
I'm sure, yeah,
and all
yeah.
over
And we'd all go to
East
Donegal.
America.
We'd go to Donegal for the summer.
Every summer.
Yeah, and that was always the dream, to go back to live. Yeah.
And when you went back for those holidays and when you went back to live, were you seen as not completely Donegal? Were you slightly outside in Scotland?
Well, you'd have cousins would be
Donegal?
slagging you about it, you know, as well. But then it's so much family and that, my aunties, like you were from Donegal as far as they were concerned, you know. And it's like in Letterkenny now, like out to Letterkenny, it's like, I've got so much family there, I'm from Letterkenny. It is an awkward thing though, because sometimes people see my accent and they think, all right, you're Scottish. And you say, no, I'm from Donegal. And they'd argue with you, do you know? They'd fucking argue with you, you know? And it was common in Donegal for people of Scottish. I'd be like, at the same time, I thought, is it easier for me just to say, oh yeah, I'm Scottish, and I think it would be lying, you know?
And you're forgiven then. Okay, we'll let you be Scottish. Yeah. Won't let you be Irish.
Yeah, fuck them.
Yeah.
And I did have that bullying thing around Bloody Sunday, because we'd moved back and Bloody Sunday happened. One guy got me in the playground, a much bigger guy, and he called me a paratrooper or something like Scottish. And I remember thinking, yeah, me and James Connolly, you know, like.
So did you have to learn how to be quick with your responses because of things like that?
Yeah. Well, I suppose in Glasgow you'd have learned that anyway.
Yeah.
But in the humour in Donegal, because I spent my summers in Donegal with my cousins anyway, so like Donegal was like the most exotic place. When we moved back to, I'm telling these stories, I've told these stories many times, but it always amazes me. When I done Nettle Horse in Donegal.
Nettle Horse is the latest show theatre that John has written.
It was in Letterkenny. Michael Harding came to see it, and he was saying, oh, it's real European, it's really pure European. And I was like, no, it's pure Letterkenny, you know, because there's this guitarist who just died recently, God rest him, Ted Ponsonby. And when I was 12, I says to Ted, so Ted, he's a guitar hero. I says, so who's your favourite guitar player? Thinking it's got to be Jimi Hendrix, Rory Gallagher, Eric Clapton, do you know? And he says, Andre Segovia, or maybe Django Reinhardt, do you know? Nice. And that's what I just loved. From the start in Letterkenny, you were exposed, like, it was a melting pot, even though, as long as there's books, there was an absorption and a taking of culture.
But why was that,
I don't know why.
Just happened.
There was another thing that I remember, which I loved, I've told many times as well, was stepping outside our door and hearing this motorbike and looking around, and there's Paul Ponsonby, Ted's brother, had long red hair, and he had a chopper motorbike, right? I think it was a Triumph, but it had proper forked handles, right? And he's lying way back. Sorry for the microphone, Lofty. He's lying way back in the motorbike, and he's got a T-shirt, red hair flowing back, and he's got this T-shirt, black is beautiful, in a fist, black power T-shirt. And the old town in Letterkenny was the most exotic place you could possibly imagine, do you know, for fine books, for just, yeah. I found it really an inspiring place to be.
Yeah.
And that was before the internet.
I know, isn't it amazing? You know, I often think of what they call regional styles in Irish music, and they're not regional styles. They're usually a personal or a family style. Yeah. And it creates this thing that we see by looking in the past or looking from outside. Yeah. We see this regional style. Yeah. But it could be something like that in Letterkenny, that there were a couple of school teachers or librarians or something like that. And it blossomed because of them. And
there was the big thing that happened, like during World War II, there was, Derry was...
Big base.
Big base in Derry. It was the centre for the North Atlantic Fleet. So you had lots of all navies from all over the world, but you had lots of Americans and Marines there.
Okay.
And as well with Derry, German bombers couldn't make it as far as Derry. They could only make it as far as Belfast. So Derry was safe during World War II. So you had dances going on, and you had Marines, and you had Louis Armstrong played in Derry during World War II, Ella Fitzgerald, do you know? So I wrote a play about that as well, about the chance of it was possible for a Donegal farmer to be exposed to the latest American jazz. But that really did happen. When I'd done the research, you found out that actually, yeah, that's what happened, you know. Derry had American jazz. And
so that's why. That's the reason then. It wasn't
they're all really good at
school
jazz.
teacher.
Yeah. And that had an influence subsequently on the show band scene. You know, the capital show band would have been Derry, I think it was. So that would have some influence on the show band scene in Northern Ireland. And that was, I mean, Donegal was practically Northern Ireland kind of thing, you know.
Fascinating.
So, anyway.
Come here, talking about that reminded me of, what's the song that you sang on that earlier?
Sparkplug.
Sparkplug, which is it's about somebody
it's just that rural thing as well, that
following music,
which is a theme in a lot of my work as well, is that how interesting rural Ireland is, and how diverse it is, and how mad and surreal it is, without trying.
It just is. What is that joke?
It's a cigar box guitar, which was common African American kind of thing that would have been when obviously like no money for guitars, so make guitars. Well, they call me Sparkplug Callahan. I suppose that's who I am. I used to live in a caravan, now I live in my uncle's barn. Happy days are here again. I can't help myself, get all I need in Tully Glen. Ruby's down at the crossroads, throwing horseshoes with the men. There's some handsome men down at the crossroads. I hope she don't fall in love with one of them. Jealousy, could I be in love again? I can't help myself, get all my love in Tully Glen. Take it away! Myself a tractor, a really sweet Davy Brown. I wanted to go faster, so I put the pedal down to the ground. Guard a chase, I escaped in the end. I can't help myself, get all my thrills in Tully Glen. I can't help myself, get all my thrills in Tully Glen. Do you know I nearly distracted myself there? I just remembered I saw a picture on Facebook. So, I'll get this.
Tied up.
Tied up. Yeah, I'll repeat that. I distracted myself during, so just because of how I noticed just how strident I had become there in my defence of Donegal as the cradle of Western civilization and sophistication there. And I just remembered there's a picture of Ian Drury. Used to spend his summers in Donegal.
That was another name I was
well.
thinking of earlier.
Ian Drury used to spend his summers in Donegal as well. So there might be some cultural commonality there as well.
Yes. Well, that brings us on to your punk years.
Yes.
And your squatter years.
Yes.
And catching rain coming in off the leaking roof in London.
Yeah, yeah. That was when I was
6.
No, it was no. That thing was the other great thing that happened in Letterkenny was punk came. Punk came to Letterkenny, and you'd be reading the Musical Express every week, and then there's a stories about the Sex Pistols. So yeah, so then I left Letterkenny in 1977 and went to London to the Squats. I'm very tempted to do another song. Have we time for another one?
Go on, yeah.
I'll do it sitting down. Are you all right with songs? Is everybody happy with songs? I can't see you all at home, obviously.
Well, if you don't want songs and you want poetry, he can do that. If you don't want poetry and you want recitations, he can do that. If you want long division, algebra, he can do that too.
I can't. I'm desperate at maths. That's why I get into punk. That's why I'm really busy now trying to get my punk pension plan together. Because there is none. So I started up the first punk band in Donegal in 1977. There was Joe Petrol and the Petrol Bombs. And I was Joe Petrol. And I was also the Petrol Bombs. Because nobody else wanted to be a punk in Donegal in 1970. No matter what they tell you now, it was me in the shed with the dog. Me wearing the dog's collar. The dog looking up at me.
In a shirt and tie.
Yeah. So this is a punk song from Donegal, 1977. Would it have been easier to be a punk in London or New York, sing about urban decay? Not in Letterkenny. So much milk in my village, now that the cows have come home. So much milk in my village, buckets and buckets and buckets, oh bucket. I met Mary from the dairy, she'd the best calves I'd ever seen. Butter, 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 Mary loves an udder, cat with a milking machine. Please say cheese, stop this Frisian, don't be cold. Be my carrot gold, 'cause it's anarchy in the cheese factory, anarchy in the cheese factory, anarchy in the cheese factory, and Letterkenny. This is very kind, thank you very much. God, you have your work cut out for you tonight.
Did you?
And use at home relaxing. Huh?
Did you have an English teacher at any stage? What did they
thing,
think about you?
I didn't have that. The teacher that I had that strikes me most was I had a teacher called Miss Gilfeder in Glasgow. We were really little kids, and she was beautiful. And I was about 7, and I was totally in love with her. And she said to me, one day I was writing songs then, and she says to me one day, she says, "You're the next Lennon and McCartney."
Ooh.
And I often wonder, I'd love to meet her now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But things like that, I mean, you remember that and you were only a kid.
Yeah.
You didn't go and say, "Hey, Lennon and McCartney, who are they?"
No, everybody knew who Lennon McCartney
You knew who they were.
Yeah.
But isn't it amazing the power that could have on a kid?
I mean, but not only that, but she was just really, it's funny, I just think how important that is that we get that care, that someone cares enough, not to necessarily even say things like that, but obviously for her to say that, it was always reflected in other areas of her teaching, do you know?
Yeah.
And she was just a really good teacher.
And did you never get an essay with the red mark saying A,
Yeah, I get that.
Or
Yeah.
F.
Yeah, I got good English essays and that, but that was compensated by my Latin. Mr. Nee, you have as much knowledge of Latin as my big toe.
I had an English teacher who swapped her class with somebody else, all the essays. And when my essay came back, corrected by her friend, it came back and said, this student is depraved.
Wow. Yeah. And have you got the essay?
No. I might.
Yeah, can you
It's up
remember?
in the attic somewhere. I
Right,
have no idea
wow.
what it was. But I became very normal after that.
Did you? But there's that part of you that's still...
That's why I like odd people.
Right.
Because I'm
Okay.
still depraved underneath it all.
Right, yeah. I just wondered about that essay now. I wonder what's in it.
I know, yeah, I never thought about that.
Yeah,
What's
yeah.
in it? You never know, it might be up in
Will
the
you
attic.
flip one day?
I was just watching Bone Jetty. And for those on the internet and here in this massive cavernous hall who have not seen Bone Jetty, it's an hour long, 58 minutes long. And it's a collaboration between yourself and Laura Sheehan.
Laura Sheeran.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell us what's it about. The reason I'm saying it is that there's an academy in it, and the reason you're in the academy is because you're...
Yeah. Well, so it's set in a dystopia. It was a story that I wrote was going to be a play called Bone Jetty, and it was started before lockdown, but went into lockdown, and I collaborate with an artist, Laura Sheeran, who is an incredible artist, and so it became apparent after lockdown that we weren't going to get a chance to do a theatre show. So what could we do? So we decided that we'd do a hybrid. And when we decided that we'd do a hybrid, we thought, well, rather than just filming a theatre show and calling it hybrid, that we'd have some cinematic quality as well. You know, we'd have some of the scenes would be exterior shots in Rossmuck and Connemara and different things. So we made a film with hardly any budget called Bone Jetty. But the basic story was about a character called Puck Turl. And in Galway in the future, there is the Academy of Holodramatic Arts. And in the Academy of Holodramatic Arts, they take artists and they take maps so that they could create holograms. And then they'd replace the local artists with Marlon Brando, say, and Sarah Bernhardt. So they'd be able to put all these productions, touring theatre productions of Streetcar Named Desire or Playboy of the Western World with Marlon Brando and Sarah Bernhardt, and you don't have to pay accommodation for the actors or per diems or any of that. So it's basically just that about artists being bled for artificial intelligence. And but they get to a stage where they cop on that it's not working because you got the best actors, you've bled them, but they cop on that they need the quirky ones, the oddballs, the bad actors, and that's where Puck Turl comes in, you know.
The depraved actors.
Yeah, there's a character called Loving, and so it's all these people who are fuck-ups, basically, and they end up working in the academy so that the AI can try to figure them out, because that's the one thing that AI can't do, is that idiosyncrasy of these characters.
And do they know that they're there for that? They find out that they're there for that reason.
Yeah, well, they know it straight from the start, really. They figure out, although they're plumos, there's a lot of plumos at the academy as well. And then there's a club called Heebie Jeebies where they go for the real art, to create real art.
Behind the backs
of
the big brotheries.
The big brothery people, yeah. I don't know how, did that sound exciting from where you're sitting? See, I'm just wondering about what the people, and I'm using you as an example of the people at home, and God knows what they're doing. They could be sitting there doing anything, really.
Shh. Stop it now while you're ahead. But it's on YouTube.
It's on
YouTube.
Bone Jetty. Bone Jetty. Laura Sheeran.
And what does she do normally in her?
She's a she's a multidisciplinary artist. She's got a character called Persona, who's singer in electronic music. She's got a few albums out as Laura Sheeran, and also as Nanu Nanu, an electronic band she had a few years ago. She's a videographer, cinematographer, so she would have done lots of videos for something like Crash Ensemble and so many people I can't remember now.
So and you're just...
And she's a pole dancer. She's just really...
You're the pole dancer?
No, she's a pole dancer. Kind of
So you've just finished doing stuff with Neil Martin for the Cello Festival in Galway. And, you know, you've got the highly strung orchestra. Do you like collaborating with people? Because you're a one-man band, but do you enjoy working with other people?
I love working with other people, yeah. I'm really fortunate. I think in general, good artists are generous. So I've just worked with so many good, generous artists. And I come from a punk tradition, which means that I can be a multi-instrumentalist in a punk tradition, because I can not play all these instruments equally. You know, I'm equally unable to play any instrument. So that means I could play the grand piano, no bother. Anything, just hand it to me and I'll get some noise out. But it's really great working with real musicians who can, and I find them really generous, and you learn a bit, and it's a lovely space. Yeah, the highly strung orchestra are just to die for. That's 3 friends of mine from Donegal. See all the talents in Donegal, isn't it?
Boring.
Jeremy Fitzgerald,
So boring.
Orla Gilchrist, and Fionn Robinson. Yeah.
Yeah, and I haven't seen you perform live apart from on YouTube, but the CD, I bought the CD, and it's everything from epic to doggerel.
Yeah, well, they were all songs from theatre shows. It's just the same, like that wasn't, but like, it's just taking songs. I had all these songs over the years from theatre shows, so I brought them to the band. They learnt them in 3 days. And then we went into the studios and we recorded them in Attica, great studio in Donegal, Tommy McLaughlin's studio, and we recorded it there in 3 days, I think.
Brilliant. Real rock and roll, early rock and roll.
Yeah.
Not 1970s where you spend 3 months doing one drum solo. From that CD, Lorraine, which the first time I ever heard it, it blew my mind. I don't know, I'm not sure why. Musically, there's something to me that's very special. Again, I'm like you, I'm not musically literate, but it does something. Well, okay, same. Him and his punk playing. No, but there's something in it that's really special. But what's this? That's the music, and of course the words are gorgeous. But what's the story behind it?
The story is, I'm just going to take a drink.
This is Lorraine, with an interesting spelling.
Yeah.
Or maybe you never noticed.
I did. No, I did. I noticed I was in the squats in London, and I'd been reading a lot of Oscar Wilde, and I had this fictional character called Lord Petrol. It's all called Joe Petrol, as in Jah Rastafari. So so I was always creating little worlds, and then I didn't finish the work so much, but I had this character called Lorraine Wilde, and I decided to change the spelling of it to make it a bit more interesting. So there'd be these fictional kind of punkish characters. And that was the first time that the character, Lorraine Wilde, and then I mixed that with a girl who I knew from Andersonstown, and it kind of went from there. In Donegal in the 70s, lots of girls from Belfast and boys they'd come down to Donegal for the summers to go to the Gaeltacht, or just to get away from Belfast. The 70s, obviously, it was hectic. So there's all these gorgeous girls coming down from Belfast. You'd be falling in love all the time. And so it's a bit tribute to them as well. Yeah. And I wrote it in a squat in London on a 2-string guitar. So
when you were in the squat in London, thinking like this, were you wistful for Donegal and those summers?
Yeah, it was mad. I wrote a lot of stuff about Donegal when yeah. And reading it, which was great because it meant that I hadn't read Flann O'Brien till I went to London or Joyce or any of that. So I just went through a phase of reading everything everything.
And was that you on your own, or were there other people with you?
Well, yeah, well, and the squats. I mean, that was
talking.
another thing about the squats as well. Like the first squat I went over to in 1977, it was a Letterkenny squat. So there was so lots of my cousin was there, so that's how I became Little John, because my cousin Johnny Nee was there. So I couldn't be John Nee anymore, so I had to be. That's how I became Little John. And yeah, and there was lots of, they'd all be at UCD, most of them, and be spending a couple of years in London, or a year in London, working the building sites to get some money. And so there was literature, there was an availability of literature and music. There was a whole
and conversations about
conversations.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bit too much hippie music, but still.
What music?
Hippie music.
Hippie music.
Yeah.
Will you sing The Rain for us?
I will, if you'll play.
Please. I'll play, yep.
Lorraine donders on down the Andersons town, devastated as any petrol bomb. Wear sisters' earrings on a roddy clone. Lorraine, she made me brave as thunder. She hung from my neck like silver. She made me brave as thunder. She hung from my neck like silver. 'Neath a classical navy blue sky, she made me nocturnal again. Wear navy blue trench coat and monkey boots, Lorraine. She made me brave as thunder. She hung from my neck like silver. She made me brave as thunder. She hung from my neck like silver. She made me brave as thunder. She hung from my neck like silver. She made me brave as thunder. She hung from my neck like silver. Silver, silver. I never play sitting down. And that's the first time I'm copping on. It's really hard to breathe sitting down.
I know, yeah. Only when you're slightly corpulent.
Yeah. What are you saying?
Nothing, no, I'm talking about me.
Oh, yeah.
Me. Fine body of a man that you be. So what's next now? What are you up to now? You've been touring Nettlehorse, which is gorgeous.
Right, thank you very much for saying that. And Nettlehorse is going to London next weekend.
Brilliant. To where?
To the Irish Cultural Centre in Hammersmith.
Okay.
And I'm wild excited about that, as I say in Donegal. Wild excited about that.
Will your squat buddies be there?
I don't know, they're all dead or in prison. Yeah, so I was thinking that, so I'm going to have a look around London to see the bits that I built, is it still standing? And
What
yeah,
were you doing
I'm just really excited.
Before you go back to that, what were you doing on the buildings?
My first
What
job,
was your
I got a job at a plastering company, Martin and Dennis. They were it was Martin and Dennis was the name of the company. They're a big plastering company. And the first job out on the building site in Finsbury Park was the biggest site in London. And the plastering company was a mix. It was racially divided, the whole building site. Like you had the bricklayers or the brickies were all Sikhs, Singhs, and they were lovely. And carpenters were usually Irish. Martin and Dennis, the plasters, were a mixture of Irish and Jamaican, or Caribbean, because some are in Trinidad as well. And then the painters were all National Front, white National Front. So it was an interesting building site to be on as well. You know, you had lots of interesting conversations in the men's toilets, people shouting at each other. You know, the Sikhs would always be having a go at the National Front kind of thing about, you know, you came to India and look what you done to India. And well, we built bridges, didn't we? And all that. It was just really. And then with the plastering companies, well, that I was working with, the Irish, you'd always like go for a few pints at lunchtime kind of thing. I get fed up of that because you want to be staying for more than one, so it's really difficult to go for a couple of. So I copped on that at lunchtime. What I do is I'd go up to the plasterers, the Rasta plasterers, who would work through their lunchtime, and they'd be kind of listen to reggae when they're mixing up the plaster and all that kind of thing. And it was lovely.
Brilliant. Sorry, I know I want to get back to what plans you have, but you then became a Hare Krishna.
Yeah.
Was that that same time?
That was well, it's a long story. I don't know how we're doing time-wise. Can you check in the time? Basically, it was punk.
Stop. It's too late.
There was punk, and around that time there was a lot of reggae music, and reggae was part of the punk music scene as well, very much so. And so I got way into that, and I came back to Letterkenny, cultural hotspot. Letterkenny used to have a folk festival. Used to have an international folk festival. Now this was way before Peter Gabriel and all that world music. And they used to have these bands, like there's a band over from Bradford doing Indian music, and there's all these different people from all over, dancers over from Moscow, folk dance, but they had Rastas. This Rasta band was over, Century Steel and Skin Band. Not Century, not to be confused with, they were a band that came years later. They were the Steel and Skin Band, that's what they were called. And they were a mixture of Africans and Caribbean peoples. So I met them, and it was brilliant. I met them up in London again, and one of them was way into the Hare Krishnas, and that is how I got my interest in the Hare Krishnas. And long story short, I ended up joining the Hare Krishnas for 8 months.
8 months.
8 months, and I was serious about it. Yeah.
You did it full on. Did you?
I shaved head and everything. And there's parts of it that I loved, and there's other parts that I wasn't comfortable with. Yeah.
The food
was gorgeous.
Gorgeous.
But I mean, it's intrinsically, from my perspective, it's misogynistic, and it just didn't sit right. Do you know?
The whole Hare Krishna ethos.
It's a very patriarchal system. Do you know where it's coming from? And I was always grew up between my sisters, and I always grew up with strong women, and so it's really hard to sell me that fucking patriarchal bullshit kind of thing.
So did you go back and tell them your strong sisters?
Well, no, at the time I didn't. At the time I was, at the time I was very well, because as well as that, I To this day, I'm sure there are many Hare Krishna devotee women who would argue with me that, well, and the other thing was they were strong women as well. So, for a while I was taking, okay, right, if you're saying this is right and this is good for you, who am I to disagree with that, you know? But it's just one of the issues that, and polystyrene, that was the other polystyrene, the famous punk, she was there, you know? So like,
I thought you were talking about the food and the polystyrene cups.
No. Polystyrene, because there was a whole new generation. It wasn't the George Harrison generation. There was lots of punks. So like, poly, like I was, like, you're not going to, like sheaf, you know. So there's lots. So yeah, I'm not going to argue with her.
No.
You know, yeah.
Interesting. Well, okay, moving back to where we were. Sorry for the detour.
Yeah. It's just because there's so little time to talk about these subjects.
I know.
It's really hard to kind of get into detail about them, yeah. You know, the food is gorgeous, though. I love the food.
This is the problem. Every time we start talking, it just...
we go in tangents, yeah.
It goes on, and none of us are the worse for it afterwards.
Yeah.
You're finishing the Nettle Horse up at the moment. Do you go back to old shows? Or are you always leaving them in the past?
I try to move on, well, just because I've got ADHD. It's just to intrigue myself. I just have to keep going, kind of thing, and come up with new stuff pretty much regular. It makes it interesting for me, you know.
How many
it's just
hours
like a little
do you
child
sleep?
playing, really. It's like a little child out in the fucking yard playing.
Yeah.
You have to go somewhere else all the time, isn't it?
Do you sleep?
I do, yeah. I love sleeping. One of my favourite poetry lines is, well, it's not poetry, it's from Whiskey in the Jar. I don't know how old people are. Can you remember when Whiskey in the Jar, Thin Lizzy put it out? And it was Phil Lynott. It was such a beautiful poet. Part of me wishes that he'd stayed as a poet kind of thing, you know, or they hadn't gone so heavy, and they'd, you know, like their first 3 albums were gorgeous. Phil Lynott, a great influence. But what a beautiful poet. But his delivery as well. And I love that line in Whiskey in the Jar. Some men like a fishing, some men like a fowling, some men like to hear the sound of cannonball roll, but me, I like sleeping, especially in my Molly's chamber. I'm not doing it justice here, but the way he says, me, I like sleeping, that just resonates with me. That's just cellular. I love sleeping.
So you've got ADHD and you sleep a lot.
Yeah, well, not sleep a lot. I sleep when it's nighttime.
When it's dark.
When it's dark. When I have to sleep. I sleep 8 hours a night. 7.5 sometimes.
That's good. Oh yeah, I'll buy that.
So when in London, I stayed awake for days then. That was a different culture kind of thing, yeah.
And do you find it hard to shut your mind down?
Yeah, but I enjoy life. So there's lots of things, like, it doesn't have to be hectic all the time. You know, there's lots of things to appreciate, and nature, and very much so, and good company. And I live in the west of Ireland, so it's astonishingly beautiful. And and then there's, for the busyness of my mind, there's all the artistic, either my artistic activities or appreciating other people's artistic activities. Do you know? It's enough to keep the mind busy when it needs to be busy. Did
I talk to you about the kids say, would you prefer to be blind or deaf?
Right.
These impossible questions. And I came up with this one, that you have to choose one of these. You can perform, play, sing music forever, but you can never hear anybody else's music. Or you can hear everybody else's music, but you can never perform again. Which do you go for?
I didn't realize I was so narcissistic that I'd play for myself. Because you know what? Even though I sometimes, because I think it's a self-defense mechanism as well, possibly, that I put my music down, kind of thing. I love my music. Do you know? Them songs are very precious to me, you know? And I could just write songs all day long for the beauty of them.
You do realize our relationship is now moved to a different place.
Yeah.
No, because I'd be the opposite. It's gas. I'd be the opposite. But that's my problem. You're talking about listening as well as playing. I find myself just listening all the time, and I can't get myself to play.
Right. But the other thing is that you could be playing other people's songs, or when you're writing, there's an element.
But not if you can never hear them again.
What do you mean? Like, you could play Jimi Hendrix song.
Okay,
If you could
I'm
play
going to
Jimi
make this.
Hendrix.
I'm going to make this harder then.
Yeah, don't make it. It's hard enough.
That you forget all the great music you've ever heard, as well as
See,
not being
I don't think that's possible. I don't because I think it happens in your mind. I think it happens all over, you know. And I think that every time I'm trying to write a song or anything that I write or everything that I create, there's the ghost of someone else's work in it, kind of thing.
And I
you know?
see that a lot in what you do, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's
like Lou Reed appears in Nettle Horse. So it's worth the ticket price just for that to see. Where else are you going to see Lou
the
Reed?
ticket price and the flight to London.
And the flight to London, yeah, it's worth it. But some people watching at home might be closer to it, might be in London. There might be someone out, where's the camera?
All
there might
you
be
Londoners.
Londoners. Or if you know somebody in London, do them a favour and tell them about this on the 1st and 2nd of June in the Irish Cultural Centre in London. It's going to be amazing. It's going to be very beautiful.
What is the next show then? Where are you, what's brewing, bubbling away in the
Then
background?
after that, I'm working on a show called Zeitgeist Jukebox, which is a funny title. I couldn't think of it. You like it?
Yeah, of course.
I couldn't. You know, Ollie
No
Jennings,
idea what it means.
Ollie Jennings, the man just thought. I told him, and he wasn't really mad about it, and I could see why he wouldn't, because it's not really stay on your lips kind of thing. It's like somebody like. How long do you remember Zeitgeist? Oh, no, that show, the one, the funny name, like Zeitgeist.
No, but if you have a very ordinary name, nobody remembers it.
Right,
Whereas if your name is strange, they remember it.
It just seems the best name to describe this particular show.
Why?
I thought of lots of other names because it's Zeitgeist, it's in the moment, very much of the moment. It's set very close to now, and now set in this contemporary times, and times are very bleak. Taking that perspective, bleak and dystopian, as this could be perceived, as well as it actually is, very dystopian. And it's this guy discovers an old warehouse with recording equipment in it, and he decides to make an album. It's going to an album to save the world. It's going to be the best album of the 21st century, and the audience become collaborators in that, and I write 12 songs. In the space of just over an hour, we write 12 brand new songs in collaboration with the audience. So it'll be different every night. And
you write 12 new different songs each performance.
Each performance, yeah.
You really take the easy route, don't you? You're
Yeah,
lazy.
but it's that thing is, and as well as that, I'd done it once just to see was it possible, not the whole show, but just to see could you write 12 songs, and I'd done it in Campbell's Tavern in Cloughan-Over. Outside Galway, so it's not just Letterkenny. There's other places that are cultural hotspots in rural Ireland.
And did you sleep after that?
I did, yes. I tell you, I slept.
So you
after
slept
that.
like a log.
Yeah. But I mean, like that as well. There was kind of genres, like, and you start thinking, there's so many fantastic, inspiring artists. I mean, I could have spent this whole time talking about some of the great artists that just inspired me. Do you know? Duke Ellington, I love Duke Ellington. And Duke Ellington's got a song with Mahalia Jackson, Come Sunday. Oh, it is the most astonishing thing. It's like
Come Sunday.
It's Come Sunday. It'd make you want to go to church, kind of thing like that. And I tell you, I'd be very reluctant to go to church, but that would have me in the door of church like a shot, you know. And artists of that caliber, like Duke Ellington's just incredible, you know. And keep hearing new stuff in his music all the time. And Mahalia Jackson, like, you're really talking powerful spirit there. And
keep talking, I'm busy.
Keep talking. I don't know if I'm talking shite here now. And it's hard
no,
to know.
it's gorgeous.
When, yeah.
Thank you.
But,
I have it.
Yeah.
So you're going to do a set number of performances, or this is going to go on?
I don't know what will happen. It's like that. You never know what's going to happen with a show. Like, Nettle Horse was turned down funding for touring for the Arts Council. And so it seemed like, wow. But we'd done it. And we had no idea what kind of response it was going to get. And had done it down and began the tour in Cork, the beautiful rebel city in the rebel county. And it wasn't selling out that much because we had no publicity budget or anything like that. So it was just a lot of word of mouth. But there was a discount given for young people, and some kids came to it, like 20 people in their early 20s, students and that, And they really loved it and told all their friends about it. So a whole new audience came to the show that I couldn't have anticipated. Whereas maybe if I had that budget for publicity, you'd have been targeting other people, you know. But so this whole new life was born out of the fact that you're from that younger audience, you know, which I take a lot of inspiration from young people anyway. I'm totally inspired by young people and their response to Palestine and for all their activism and for their truth telling, their truth speaking, and for their creativity as well. I'm just blown away by young people. I just think they're amazing. So for me to have a younger audience is very good for me as well.
And that's something you and I have spoken about before, that you got that young audience there by chance.
Yeah.
By circumstance.
I love that. I love that chance aspect.
It's so difficult as an artist to be an artist and to be a business person at the same time.
Yeah.
Because the people aren't going to come unless you're a business person.
Yeah.
And it's soul destroying because
it can
it's
be
not
soul
natural
destroying.
to you.
It's not natural yet. And particularly if you get ADHD as well, it makes it really easier kind of thing in that. But it's what can you do? I mean, it means that you're in situations where things happen. That's it. I mean, now I'm really positive and I'm talking about the good side. So it's not the hard side of it. It's all the happy accidents that happen.
Yeah.
Do you know, like I got a 5-star review for a show I done. We're doing it at a festival in Donegal. And the arts correspondent from the Guardian newspaper happened to be in Donegal in that weekend. So I'm in a place, where was it? Clonmany. Does somebody know Clonmany? So that's it. I'm in Clonmany, and the arts correspondent from the Guardian just happens to come to see the show there, and I end up with a 5-star review in the Guardian, right beside a 4-star review for Swan Lake and Covent Garden. Do you know? And you're thinking, like, so if I had a publicity team, that you couldn't, that's the things that happen when you put yourself in the way of serendipity and synchronicity, all these elements, little magical things happen. And then that helps you to wonder and marvel at the world more. Yeah. Do you know?
And I suppose you have a choice at any time in your life. Are you on a journey to an end destination, or is the journey the thing?
Yeah. It's the journey.
I think that's the secret, is when you realize the journey is the thing.
I'll go to tell you a wee story, but shortly after my mother died, she appeared to me in a dream. And she says, Limavady. And I thought, what? And it was like she's really intensely, the thing that she died without telling me was Limavady. That was this. And at the time I said, oh yeah, of course, Limavady. And I woke up and thought, I better write that down. So I wrote it down. And I kept waking up through the night remembering Limavady. So next morning I thought, what's Limavady? What is that? She was never even in Limavady, I don't think, you know. So I thought Limavady, and I thought, what's Irish for dog leaping or something like that?
Limavady,
I think that. But so I tried to figure out what does it mean, and then I thought maybe it's I don't bet, don't gamble, but I thought I'll go to the bookies. And I looked at horse races, nothing with Limavady. Dog races, nothing. I thought, what is? And I thought, the only thing I know to do in life is write a show. So I wrote a show called Limavady, My Heart's Delight, which is about a guy who's similarly had that dream and went to Limavady as the promised land, thinking that everything will be there. When he arrives in Limavady, his dreams will come true. There'll be big flurry potatoes and all the good stuff will happen in Limavady. So I thought I better do this journey just to see the geography of the whole journey. And I drove and I made a big adventure, brought tape recorders, instruments, everything in the car, made a big expedition driving to Limavady. Took 2 days to drive to Limavady to do it. And I was really disappointed by Limavady. You know, when I finally got to the Lidl in Limavady, and I looked back and I thought, my mother, basically, but the journey was gorgeous. You know, stopped for a pee at the side of the road, and there'd be bees in the clover. The journey was just beautiful. There was horses, and you know, that was my mother. You're a lovely woman to ever be in a bus with, because she'd be looking out and she'd be noticing whin bushes. That's gorse bushes about, you know, like 3 miles away. She'd spot them. She'd just be primroses at the side of the road. You know, like she would just. It's the journey. Yeah.
That's gorgeous.
Yeah, that was it. So I wrote a show. Yeah. about that. I write shows about it. And it's my way of processing and understanding the world, because I haven't a notion about the world or understanding it or trying to fit into it. So shows is my way of integrating things.
But that's, again, it's a thing that you see again and again. The people who think they have very little talent usually have tons of talent.
Oh, I'm not saying
People
I'm very
who know
little talent.
all about the world say they don't know anything about the world.
Yeah.
I've yet to come up with anything that you haven't something to add to
Right,
in
yeah.
the conversation.
That's me trying to understand it, kind of thing, you know.
Maybe you're just reflecting what I'm saying.
Yeah, maybe that's it. And as well, I really do love the experience of audience as well, because it is that that connectiveness, that we connect through imagination, and and I believe in love.
Yeah,
I believe in love, simply that, you know. And that was an interesting thing about punk, was because it was all that anti-hippie stuff and that, and there was a great public image song. We only wanted to be loved, you know, and talking about the way that hippies were all talking about love, but, you know, where was the actual practicality of it? They didn't, you know, they weren't very friendly to working class kids in London, kind of thing, as that song says, you know. So, and what is love? Just all that stuff, as Prince Charles says to Diana in one television interview, when he was asked what, they said to him, so are you in love? And he says, what is love? Right beside her. You know, so I'd be a bit like that. I would hate the vagueness of, you know, let's talk about love and that. But I believe deeply in the fact of, we were talking about trauma earlier. When I think about the generations of what my family came through and generations throughout the world, the trauma that people have been through, and what do they give their kids? Most importantly, love. Do you know, the people, when in the north of Ireland, I was doing workshops in 1993, and it was just at the time, 1993, 94, it was just at the time Fume Adams was starting, you know. And I was going to schools, and they were talking about the possibility of peace. And I was going to these schools with little kids, and you could see in these kids, they had open minds. All through the darkest hours of the Troubles, somebody was washing them, washing their clothes, washing their faces, feeding them, sending them off to school with open minds. Do you know? And I thought the politicians will get the credit for this peace process, but it's the people who have sustained and brought love into the world, do you know, and practice love daily, that you should get the credit for it.
So if you were to distill Little John Nee down to one concept, one word, would it be love?
I've got a mission statement, right? Because you have to have them for the arts councils every so often. You have to. So I had to have a mission. So I says, I play, because that's what we're all players. We play music. We play. So I play, and it's the only thing I'm good at. So I play, and I argue for love. So that's it. That's what I do. I argue for love, and all my shows argue for love. And obviously, they're not. So that's why there's always a dystopian or a dark aspect to it as well. Because I'm not saying, oh yeah, it's all. Oh no, yeah, it's not about blocked. It's about taking. Yeah, the world is fucking dark.
Yeah,
you know?
And that's what I wanted to. When I was dreaming up all of these introductions I could give you, it is that in these terrible situations that you create on stage, there's always redemption and love.
And it's what you see. It's what you see in Palestine. As you see so much tenderness and love among Palestinian people in these circumstances, you know.
Yeah.
And as we were talking as well, we were talking earlier about Marseille or something like that. About times in my life, I've been really blessed by my vulnerability, where at times when people would be talking against travellers, my experience of travellers is I've been looked after by travellers, you know, always. In my vulnerability, I've been protected, I've been treated with kindness and good humour by travellers throughout my life. Same with Muslim people in Marseille or Malaga or South Spain or so. Always, because I think people looking like, God, what are you? You're not able to, you're not fit. Like, I have to look after you now, kind of thing. And that. But I've always been treated by kindness.
But maybe the vulnerability is only the ticket in, and it's being open and honest is the thing. They
Yeah,
just
I mean-
notice you because you need help and you're bleating. You're bleating like a lamb.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't be bleating like a lamb, but you would need to bleat like a lamb. Be obvious. It's like, man, you shouldn't be here. This is not a place to be, kind of thing, you know. But always that as well, and always found that in the north as well. Like you'd be in places where you weren't supposed to be, and then somebody'd say, "Oh, come on," you know, like.
We'll take
I
you.
often get into
Sort you
places
out.
where I shouldn't be, kind of thing. Yeah.
Talking about places where you shouldn't be, I have a request.
Yeah.
I call it the kitchen.
Right. Okay. I'm going to stand up for this one.
Oh. And I'm not going to make a noise in this one. I'm going to just watch because this is for me.
This is for Bord Falcha, this one. This is about a place called the Mother's Arms, which is a fictitious place in Donegal, which I'll mention as well. There's lots of places to get really good food in Donegal, but the Mother's Arms is not one of them. This kitchen. So it's a hotel kitchen. The guy arrives in the middle of the night and they tell him, go into the kitchen and help yourself. This kitchen is minging. There's life forms evolving in this kitchen. Oh God, it's minging. There's fish in the fridge, and they look like they're thinking about walking. Oh God, it's shocking. There's mouses, mouses, mouses licking dishes like it's delicious. Ants doing a dance on the gizzard of a chicken in his kitchen. Oh God is minging. Blue bottles, playing hopscotch on the bird's eye waffles. Oh God, it's awful. Bacteria, bacteria with ambition in this kitchen. Oh God is minging, but I'm starving.
Thank you very much. I love it.
How are we time now?
It's time to wrap up.
Is it?
It's time for us to wrap up.
Is it time to wrap up? Okay, then
Well,
we'll
would
wrap
you
up.
do an off the cuff song?
Yeah. Oh,
Can
yeah.
you-
I haven't got a pen. Has anyone got a pen?
Pen and paper.
There's only 5 people, so
We get 5 words, and I'll give you a
I
word.
get 5 words, but I probably don't need a pen to write down 5 words. So it's 6 words, and maybe Niall will give me a word as well. So we need a bit of paper now. We've got pen.
We need paper. We have pen. We need paper.
Yeah. Okay.
No paper on
No paper on
stage.
stage.
No paper on stage.
So we'll start to keep things rolling along.
Get onto your microphone again
Oh, sorry about that.
for the poor people at home.
For all the people at home. I have to sit down here now. For the people, I'm real punk me. Don't use microphones or anything that sophisticated. So would you like to give me the first word comes into your head?
Not of single syllable.
Thank you very, very much.
No.
No, it can be a single, but like the first word comes into your head. I'm just pumpkin. Lovely, thank you very much. Pumpkin, this is going to be very.
So we're okay now. Sorry for sending you running around.
Pumpkin. And would you like to give me a word? House. Yourself, any? Harlequin. Harlequin, wow. Harlequin. Juniper berry. Oh, wow.
Do we need to have Little John on the microphone?
Oh, sorry. So the words I've been given so far, is pumpkin, house, harlequin, juniper berry. Thanks very much. Glockenspiel. Glockenspiel. And Niall, would you like to give us a word? Nautical. Good.
I have one.
Have you?
Transmogrify.
Thanks very much. I think that's the reason you brought me here tonight, just for this moment to humiliate me. Transmogrify. Okay, so that's the words. I should stand up, really, for the sake of the breathing.
And come here, you've all noticed I've got a set of pipes here, and that's just for the Arts Council. We're not actually going to use them at all. Maybe we'll use the pipes as the bed of this song.
Okay.
Shall we say our thank yous and our bye-byes?
Oh, yes, thank you, bye-bye.
While you're looking at your words. So thank you.
I don't have to think about this. If I think about it,
have it just straight away.
I'll be destroyed, yeah.
Thank you to our wonderful audience. Thank you to the wonderful Seamus Ennis Arts Centre, to Niall and to Jerry and to Shane and to everybody here. And thank you to Little John, wonderful Nee.
Thank you, Ronan, for having me, and it's such an honour.
Thank you for being had.
You know that, off the heart. And also, thanks to the ghost of Seamus Ennis, who's here tonight as well. Sitting there. There's the lights now. I can see there now. Okay.
So will I make
Folks, I don't know what this is going to be like at all, obviously. She wakes me in the morning and she shakes me like a doll. She says, my little pumpkin, will you bring me to the knoll? Will you bring me to the knoll? My love, will you bring me to the knoll? Will you build me a house where we can live happily in the knoll? I said, my love, my love, my love, oh, you fit me like a pair of gloves. You fit me like my own skin. You bright me up like harlequin. And I would love if I could tell you beneath the sky bright and starry that we drink some gin, some juniper berry. Oh, my love is like a glockenspiel. Her music makes me feel more real, more real, more real than still. More real than the still of a nautical ship that would make me sink down. Oh, I'd go down and I'd go down to the ocean. Oh, I'll go down to the ocean bell with you, my love, and I will tell. No nautical mile could stretch as far as the love for you that's in my heart. And all the world is gratified by the way transmogrify my life, my world. You make it bright. Oh, were you with me in the knoll tonight? That's usually a comic kind of style of thing I do, but that wasn't that. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, everybody at home. And people in London, 1st and 2nd of June.